I'm actually standing outside the actual hotel in which the Rutles actually stayed in 1964. Actually, in this room here. And it was actually inside this actual room that I actually spoke with the actual Paul Simon.
We saw the show, and I remember Sullivan was saying that, people, calm down now, everyone calm down, you know, or we can't hear, or some kind of silly warning, you know. And they opened the show, I think, and they also closed the show, which I thought was like a sort of astute planning on Sullivan's part, because it would have made you very angry if you had to sit through the whole show to wait to see the Rutles, you know. So clearly everyone would tune into that week's show just to see the Rutles. You were rolling, Peter?
Yes.
All right.
Well, tell me about the cabin.
Well, of course, the cabin was the famous, by then, the famous place that the Rutles had first played in, you know, in Rutland. But I happened to be doing a tour of the north of England then, working as a solo, and I would play folk clubs. And I came through Rutland, and I played several dates, so I asked where was the cabin, because I wanted to see what, you know, where it was. And I went there in an afternoon, and I'm not sure, I don't remember then whether it was still in use. I don't know whether bands were still playing there, because I dropped by like in a late afternoon just to see what it was, and it was very small, and it had ceilings, and you went downstairs, if I remember correctly. It was exciting because you could imagine that here is where the Rutles began, and you know, and there was nobody but local people coming there to see them, and the Rutles doing sets of 4 hours or whatever it was, and by that time, of course, they were coming and doing concerts that lasted 36 minutes, and coming in by helicopter and out and here, you know. That was the beginning.
Did you ever see any signs of Rutlemania?
Oh yeah, as particularly in the north of England. I mean, there were music newspapers. I don't remember the name, Mersey Beat or something, Mersey Sound, Ruttle Beat. I don't remember what the name. You know, there might have been one called Rutlemania that I don't remember, and it was just it focused mainly on the activities of the Rutles. And then there was they put out a fan, you know, a fan magazine, you know, for Rutles fans that you could, I think, subscribe to, and you would get it every month. You know, what the Rutles activities and what new Rutles records were coming out, and at Christmas time they would send out a Rutles record that other people couldn't get, only their fans could get, and they were usually funny. I think it was mostly Nasty who did that, who did that kind of humor.
Tell me when you first saw them in this country.
And they sang the sound. I remember the sound balance was completely off. Like I don't know whose guitar it was. You couldn't hear Stig's guitar or something, and you know, you could just. And Barry's drums were lost, and you could just really. I think basically you heard Dirk and Nasty's voice, and then that was it.
Did Artie like it?
Oh, we all liked it. Yeah.
That's good. Did it affect your work at all?
No, not at the time, because actually this was a year or two prior to the success of Simon and Garfunkel, so it didn't have any effect upon our work.
Tell me about meeting them.
That was several years later. That was in 1968, after The Graduate had become an enormous hit, and Mrs. Robinson and Bookends and The Graduate, they were all #1 in the United States. I mean, we had 3 out of the top 4 albums were Simon and Garfunkel albums, and we were touring England, and I got a message through the record company that Dirk was in town, and would we like to have lunch with him? And Art was away. He was visiting somebody, you know, and it was just me who was there, so I said, yeah, of course. I would be delighted to. And we went over to their record company, and that was the first time I met Dirk.
Played it. That's okay. Anytime, Eric.
Tell me when you met any of the Rutles.
The first Rutle that I met was Dirk, and I met him when we were in England. Simon and Garfunkel were in England to do several concerts at the Albert Hall, and it was just after the release of The Graduate, and we had #1 records on the singles charts and the album charts. Mrs. Robinson was #1, and we had 3 out of the top 4 albums, #1 album, and I got a call one day in the hotel from Derek Taylor saying that Dirk would like to come to the concert or have lunch with us, you know, and I called Artie's room and he wasn't there, and so I wandered over to the record company, and Derek Taylor introduced me to Dirk.
Was this Ruttle Corps in Savile Row?
Yes. Yeah, it was. I don't remember the street because
right.
they had the first offices and then they moved anyway. And yeah, so we went out to lunch. Dirk and me and Derek Taylor and the road manager, their boyhood friend from Rutland, I've forgotten his name. And we just went to a pub and we walked through the streets. And of course, it was now past the time when the Rutles couldn't walk on the streets, when they would be mobbed, you know, or anything. So they walked in the streets, but he was like royalty, Dirk, because truck drivers would stop and they would say, hi, Dirk, or shopkeepers would come out. Everyone, all ages, knew him, from little kids, you know, right up to older people. They had transcended the whole age group of the nation, and that's what he was like. He was like royalty, and he was very charming, really, and very courteous, and stopped to talk to people and signed autographs, and was in no way rude or egotistical or temperamental or anything. And we went to a pub and we had a simple lunch, like, I don't remember what it was, English kind of lunch, like tiny sandwiches or something, and dried sausages or something. And then I do remember, and then we all had our plates. We were all sitting around this table talking, and someone said, "Do you want a cup of tea?" or something like that. And Dirk started to like clear the plates, and Derek Taylor said to him, "Ah, that's a good boy, Dirk, just like a good working class lad, you know." He was this guy that was the king of the world, you know.
Tell me about the Sergeant Rutter album.
The Sergeant Rutter album. Well, of course, the main thing that comes to my mind with the Sergeant Rutter album is getting stoned and listening to it with earphones, you know. Particularly the chord that lasted forever, you know. The backwards tapes, and that was all the...
Did that influence your music at all?
Yes, it did influence it to a degree, although we were heading in that direction anyway, because we were spending more and more time in the studio, which is very similar to the situation that the Rutles found themselves in. But now, with all these unique possibilities of using the studio as an instrument opened up with the Sergeant Rutter album, we began to experiment ourselves with those techniques, and to that degree, they were a big influence. Yeah.
What do you think that place is in musical history?
I don't know. I'm really not good at those kind of questions. What their place is. I mean, it's probably easier to place them sociologically. as a phenomenon a sociological phenomenon of the age than to judge them at this point musically as to where they'll stand. Like any of the other enormous popular music phenomenon, Sinatra and Presley and the Rutles, and then, you know, so people say, well, you know, it's time every 10 years, who will be the next Rutles, you know. I don't think there will be a next Rutles.